In 1735, something impossible happened in the interior of colonial Brazil. A land that shouldn't exist appeared. We're not talking about a lost village, not about a wrong map or a confused expedition. We're talking about a place that emerged from nowhere, in the midst of a storm so violent that Jesuit priests swore they saw God himself creating the world again. The name? Tupanciretã, the lost land of Tupã, the indigenous god of creation, of thunder, of light. And what happened that night in 1735 defied everything we know about history, geography, and reality. Because before that storm, that place simply wasn't there. Jesuit maps show nothing. Indigenous records speak of a sacred void, a forbidden territory where not even the Charruas, the most feared warriors of the South, dared to step. Until the night of March 17, 1735, everything changed. Witnesses report that the sky opened in colors that don't exist: electric green, deep purple, living gold. And then she appeared, a woman floating above the clouds, bright, impossible, divine. The Jesuits called her the Madonna of the skies. The indigenous people screamed, "Tupã, the Mother of God." But what she said that night was what really terrified everyone. This land does not belong to the living. It was forgotten by time, and now you have awakened it. And since then, Tupanciretã became the epicenter of unexplainable phenomena. Children who disappear and reappear years later, without aging, crosses that appear by themselves in the middle of the road, and the Negrinho do Pastoreio, a legend that every gaucho knows, but in Tupanciretã, it's real. Because what the missionaries found in 1735 wasn't a new land. It was a land too ancient, a place that existed before history, before maps, before human memory. And today, 289 years later, there are still unanswered questions. Why did the Charruas avoid that region at all costs? What really happened on the night of the 1735 storm? Who, or what, was the floating woman? And why, even today, do people swear they see strange lights and hear indigenous voices in the region? If you think urban legends are just stories, Tupanciretã will prove you wrong. Because this isn't a legend, it's an unsolved historical mystery. And what you're about to discover in the next 18 minutes will change the way you see colonial Brazil forever. What's up, explorers of the unknown? Welcome to another deep dive into the darkness of Brazilian history. Today, we're going to unearth one of the most suppressed mysteries of Rio Grande do Sul. And look, I researched deep. Jesuit documents, indigenous accounts, colonial maps, everything. And what I found is so disturbing that I had to divide this video into 3 main parts: the forgotten land, what the maps don't show, and why. The night of the apparition, the 1735 event that changed everything, and the marks that don't fade, current phenomena and supernatural connections. Each part will reveal a piece of this impossible story. And at the end, you'll understand why Tupanciretã is the most terrifying place in Brazil. So grab your mate tea, turn off the lights, and let's go together. Because this journey has no return. Let's start at the beginning, or rather, what should be the beginning. Because when you take the Jesuit maps of the southern missions between 1680 and 1730, Tupanciretã doesn't exist. There's São Borja, São Miguel, São Nicolau. The reductions are all marked, but where Tupanciretã should be, nothing. A blank space, a cartographic void. And it's not because the Jesuits didn't know about the region. They mapped even the smallest streams. It's because something prevented them from recording it. The Charruas, warrior peoples, feared even by the Spanish, had a name for that area, Ivitu Rape Canyi, which means the path of the forgotten wind. And according to the Minuano elders who lived with the Charruas, that place was where Tupã buried the first world. Think about that. It's not where Tupã created. It's where he buried, as if it were a cosmic cemetery, a place that once was something and was purposely forgotten. The indigenous people avoided passing through there. Didn't hunt, didn't fish, didn't camp. They said that whoever entered heard voices, voices of people who never existed. And more, they swore that time worked differently there. There are reports of hunting groups that entered in the morning and left 3 days later. But for them, an hour had passed, and the opposite too. Expeditions that spent 1 day there, but when they returned, weeks had passed in the real world. And here it gets even stranger. In 1728, Father Cristobal de Aranda writes in his diary, "There is a region west of São Miguel that the Indians call the land of Tupã. They forbid us to go. They say whoever enters comes back different or doesn't come back." And he adds something that gives me chills to this day. "I saw with my own eyes. From afar the land seems to tremble as if it breathed." A land that breathes. But the Jesuits were stubborn. They didn't accept forbidden zones. So in 1735, a group led by Father Miguel Fernandez decides, we're going there. We're planting a cross. We're baptizing that land. And that's when everything went wrong. Because on the night of March 17th, 1735, when the group approaches the forbidden zone, the sky explodes. It's not a common storm, it's a creation storm, lightning in impossible colors, green, purple, gold. The ground shakes, not like an earthquake, like something waking up. And then she appears, floating, bright, impossible. The Jesuits fall to their knees. It's the Virgin Mary. It has to be. But the indigenous people who were with them scream, "Tupã si, Tupã sai," the Mother of God, Tupã's consort. And what she says freezes everyone's blood. "You should not have come. This land was sealed, and now it is awake." And when the sun rises the next day, Tupanciretã is there, for the first time on maps, for the first time in history, as if it had been created that night. Let's talk about what really happened that night, because the records don't make sense. Father Miguel Fernandez writes on March 18th, 1735, "The storm lasted 3 hours, but when dawn broke, 3 days had passed. 3 days. That nobody lived." The indigenous people accompanying the Jesuits tell an even more disturbing version. They say that during the storm, the world stopped. Birds froze in the air, rain was suspended, the wind died, and in absolute silence, something woke up. The apparition of the Madonna of the skies wasn't calm, it wasn't serene. According to reports, she screamed, a scream that the Jesuits described as the sound of 1,000 souls being born at the same time. And when she pointed to the ground, the earth literally opened, not like a crack, like a revelation, as if the ground were a curtain being pulled, and underneath, structures, carved stones, symbols that nobody recognized, neither the Jesuits nor the indigenous people. And here it gets really scary. The symbols weren't Guarani, they weren't Charrua, they weren't from any known culture, but they glowed, as if they had their own energy. Father Miguel tries to record everything. He draws the symbols, notes the shapes of the stones, but when he returns to the mission of São Miguel 3 days later, his drawings are blank. The ink disappeared, as if it had never existed. And the other priests report something even more bizarre. When Miguel tries to speak about what he saw, he can't. The words come out wrong, scrambled, as if something was preventing communication. And that's when the Catholic Church does what it always did with things it can't explain: erases. The 1735 records about Tupanciretã are sealed. Father Miguel is transferred to Portugal and never returns. And officially, Tupanciretã becomes just another village in the missions. Nothing special, nothing strange. But the indigenous people don't forget. And they begin to tell a story that will become the most terrifying legend of the South, the Negrinho do Pastoreio. Everyone in Rio Grande do Sul knows the Negrinho. the slave child, punished, dead, resurrected by Our Lady. But in Tupanciretã, the story is different. Because there, the Negrino isn't a redeemed victim. He's a guardian. The Minuano elders say he wasn't saved by Our Lady. He was left there by Tupã to protect something, so that no one awakens what sleeps beneath. And since 1735, every year on the night of March 17th, people swear they see a child with a candle, walking in circles around a cross that nobody knows who planted. But that's always there. No matter how many times they try to remove it, it comes back. Now let's move to the present, because Tupanciretã today isn't normal. At first glance, quiet town, interior of RS, nothing much. But talk to the old residents, and they'll tell you things that will make you avoid that city forever. My grandmother used to say, never leave the house after 11 p.m. on March 17th, because that's when they come back. There's a cross on the road to the countryside. Everyone knows. They tried to remove it in the 90s. Brought a tractor, chains, everything. The cross didn't move. And the tractor driver? Disappeared. Never found. I saw the Negrino, I swear. Small child holding a candle. I honked. He turned around, and he had no face. And it's not just old people's stories. In 2003, a group of researchers from UFRGS went to Tupanciretã to investigate geomagnetic anomalies. They brought equipment, compasses, magnetic field meters, and they discovered that in certain points of the city, the compass spins by itself, doesn't point north, doesn't point anywhere, just spins, as if it were looking for something that's no longer there. And there's more. There are documented reports of children who disappeared in the region and reappeared, but years later, without having aged. In 1978, a 7-year-old girl named Claudia disappears in the rural area. Searches, tracking, nothing. Case archived, and then in 1983, she appears on the same road, same clothes, same age, 7 years old. When they asked where she had been, she said, I just went to get water. It was just a minute. 5 years. That for her were 1 minute. And the scariest part? She said she had seen the woman of light, and that the woman had said, you can't go back yet, but they can lend you. Claudia died in 1991, at 20 years old, but biologically, she was 15, as if time had never worked properly for her again. And today, in 2024, Tupanciretã remains strange. Tourists avoid it. Residents don't talk. And the Cruz do Maragato, a cross planted in 1893 after the Federalist Revolution, became a pilgrimage point. Because they say if you light a candle there and ask to find what you lost, you find it, but you also find other things, shadows that shouldn't be there, whispers in dead languages, and the sound of something breathing beneath the earth, because what Tupã buried in 1735 is still there, waiting. So, what really happened in Tupanciretã? Was it Tupã? Was it the Virgin Mary? Was it something older than any known religion? The truth is nobody knows, and maybe it's better that way. Because there are things in Brazilian history that were buried for a reason, and Tupanciretã is one of them. But now you know. You know about the land that shouldn't exist. You know about the night that created a city. You know about the Negrino who never died, and if you're brave enough to visit, remember, never go out after 11 p.m. on March 17th. Never try to remove the cross. And if you see a child with a candle, don't look at their face. If you enjoyed this journey through Brazilian historical terror, leave your like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, and share it with that friend who loves a spine-chilling story, because in the next video, we're going to talk about something even more sinister, the city that disappeared twice, and this one is in the Northeast. Until next time, if you survive.